Welcome to the Alberta Forage Industry Network Sustainable Forage webinar and podcast series. For this chat, we had Dr. Ari Pudel chat with us about Sainfoin, a beneficial companion for forage crop for your favorite perennials. This recording took place on Tuesday, June 13th, 2023. We thank you for joining us. If you would like to see the video with the presentation, you can go to our website at albertaforages.ca. If you like this episode and would like to be a member of AFIN, you can go to our website or you can contact us at albertaforages@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us.
All right, everyone. My name is Chris Folkers, and I am the past chair of the Alberta Forage Industry Network. Today, we are fortunate to have Dr. Ari Pudel, who will be talking to us a little bit about Sainfoin and some of the benefits of Sainfoin. So this is some of our monthly seminars we've been having. I think they've been providing a lot of excellent information, and really happy to see, I see a great long list of people that are on the call today. So awesome to see that. So before we get started though, I'd like to do a land acknowledgement. So Alberta Forage Industry Network respectfully acknowledges that we live and work on the traditional lands of the Indigenous peoples, Inuit, First Nations, and Métis of Canada. We honor the ancestry, heritage, and gifts of the Indigenous peoples and give them thanks. So a little bit about Ari, just a bit of background on Sainfoin, and I know we've got the guru of Sainfoin in Surya Acharya with us today as well. So Sainfoin is a beneficial companion forage crop for your favorite perennial. So that's what the talk will be today, while Ari will be speaking on that. There's been a renewed interest in Sainfoin among Western Canadian forage and beef cattle producers over the last decade. A major trigger for this growing appeal has been the availability of new Sainfoin cultivars, Mountainview and Glenview, that have increased compatibility with alfalfa. Grazing alfalfa Sainfoin mixed pasture can eliminate alfalfa pasture bloat, which costs $30 to $50 million per year to the Canadian cattle producer. So that's a definite benefit there for sure. Recent research indicates that these new Sainfoin cultivars will review the historic Sainfoin breeding activities and highlight current progress on the compatibility of Sainfoin with perennial forages and prospects of Sainfoin as a sustainable livestock feed. Dr. Ari Pudel is a forage breeder, research scientist at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada's Lethbridge Research and Development. He has more than 10 years of forage breeding experience acquired through graduate and postgraduate research across different forage breeding programs in North America. His research interests are centered around the improvement and development of forage cultivars through phenotypic and genomic assisted breeding. He currently devotes his expertise enhancing the Western Canadian context by effectively addressing the challenges posed by changing climate conditions. He is committed to applied research that directly benefits the stakeholders of the forage industry in Alberta. So welcome, Ari, and we're looking forward to your presentation.
Thanks, Chris. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we sure can. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay, yeah. And thanks, AFIN, for this opportunity to present my work. And thanks all for being here. It's the busiest time of the year, and we are still working on planting and then transplanting. So yeah, I'd like to thank you all for joining with us today. And I will just start with the outline for today's talk, brief status of the forages in Canada, and then I will go for the history of Sainfoin and Sainfoin breeding in Canada. That's together with Sainfoin compatibility with alfalfa. Then I'll talk about the Sainfoin compatibility with other grass species, And I believe there will be plenty of time for questions. So I just want to show you the area in Canada that's covered by forages. So we have about 70 million acres between natural pasture and cultivated forages, of which about 36 million acres is natural rangeland, and the remaining 34 million acres, that's approximately 39% of the total crop production area in Canada, is cultivated forage. We have 33% of the cultivated forage crop in Alberta covered by forages. But the latest data from Stat Canada shows only 13 million acres reported. So this about 20 million acre hidden somewhere that's not reported in our Stat Canada data. And in this table, I'm showing you the land use by different crops over different census year, and from 2011 to all the way up to 2021. And what we are seeing here is the total area under forages. That's the sum of alfalfa hay, other tame hay, and forage seeds. So the change in 5 years, latest 5-year period, is almost 16%, and compared to 2011, it's 22%. So that's a decline in the forage acreage all over Canada. And in Alberta, we are seeing 17% decrease in total acreages. And compared to the wheat and canola, especially canola, that's an increase in the acreage over these. So the forage areas are being converted to the other crops area. And on this picture, I'm showing you the farm crop yield in Canada. And as you can see, the red one, that's the tame hay. It has the productivity of around 4.2 tons per hectare, and that's consistent across more than 60 years compared to the other field crops, which are in which the productivities are increasing. So can we increase the productivity of forage crops? And the answer to this question is to follow the best management practices, which included irrigations and fertilizers that the other crops are using. Especially for the forages, they are grown in the low productive areas, and then we have lower research in forages. That's why leading to the less number of cultivars. These all accumulate, and then if we want to improve the productivity, then we need to focus on more resources. So there are different plant breeding methods, and to talk about plant breeding in specific, it is a science or technique of improving a plant genotype. And a plant genotype, in simple language, is any organism that has a gene. And a gene is the hereditary material. And when we're doing plant breeding, we are changing the gene. So we can see there are different breeding methods. On the top, I listed here 3 different breeding methods. The selective breeding, which is the old way of doing breeding. And then in this breeding method, we do the recurrent selection of the plants for the better genotype for the trait of interest. Crossbreeding, in crossbreeding, we cross 2 different species, just like the development of hybrid broom grass, which is the cross between meadow broom and smooth broom. And there are methods such as mutagenesis, which involve treating with chemicals such as ethyl methane sulfonate, or eradications using X-rays. And recently we have genetically modified techniques, but until today, I know only one cultivar in alfalfa that's genetically modified, and that's approved in Canada, but there's no any genetically modified forage cultivar developed so far, other than a single Roundup Ready alfalfa cultivar. So yeah, forage breeding is different than other crops breeding in the sense forages are cross-pollinated, and that's why it's very difficult for controlling the pollination. And therefore, most of the forage breeding or forage breeding cultivars are developed through the half-sheaf recurrent selection procedures. So the base populations are crossed each other to get to the half-sheaves. The half-sheaves are those populations in which we know who is the mother, but we don't know who is the father. And then those populations are evaluated in the field, selected, and then recombined. This process continues for 2 to 3 cycles, depending upon the crop species and the genetic gain you want to get it. To shorten the generation cycle, recurrent genomic selection procedure can be employed. This is a new method in which we use genome of the plants and then predict the values. This way we can shorten the generation cycle and then improve the forage cultivar quickly. However, this technique has been in research for more than 20 years, and there's no any single cultivar generated through this process. So yeah, so the forage breeding program in Lethbridge has developed several cultivars in the past, and kudos to our retired scientist, Dr. Surya Acharya, who is also joining here. He has developed several cultivars here. This is just a list. I might have forgotten some of them, but we have AC Blue Jay, Longview, Dalton, Bridgeview, and Meadowview alfalfa. And we have 2 cultivars, Mountainview and Glenview for Sainfoin, Oxley 2 and Welt for Sisal milk weights, and TriStar for fenugreek. It's the only forage cultivar available, and Kayak for orchard grass, and one more S1, that's perennial cereal ryegrass. With that, the forage breeding program at Lethbridge right now is focusing on mostly 3 different perennial legume species. They are alfalfa, Sisal milk veg, and Sainfoin. So we are looking for grazing tolerance in alfalfa, drought and acid tolerance in alfalfa, and very exciting project, increase soot lipid content in alfalfa. Similarly, in Sisal milk veg, we are looking for the compatibility with alfalfa and improving seed vigor. And we are also looking for a pasture bloat in which we want to mix Sisal milk veg with alfalfa and see how it works, and even for the methane emissions. For Sainfoin, we are doing biomass and quality traits, that's using genomics and phenomics, as well as the traditional breeding methods. We have drought and acid tolerant Sainfoin, and we are also working on increasing the soot lipid content in Sainfoin. And obviously, the compatibility with alfalfa and grass species with Sainfoin. And today's talk will mainly focus on Sainfoin's compatibility with alfalfa and grass species. So yeah, Sainfoin is a beautiful legume crop, and it has different names. There are basically 2 types, which is common and the giant type. Common Sainfoin, they can live for 8 to 10 years, and giant type, they are short-lived. So Sainfoin can not only be used as a forage, but it's also used as an ornamental crop, pulse crop. The research group at Land Institute in Kansas, they are working for improving Sainfoin as a perennial pulse crop, and it's also a useful legume for nitrogen fixation. And so this wonderful legume forage crop has its long history, and it's a line diagram. It was originated around or more than 6,000 years ago in Southwest Asia and east of Mediterranean Sea. From there, it moved to Soviet Union, and in 15th century, it spread all over Europe. In North America and Australia, it came to in 18th century. And for Canada, in 1971, Melrose was the first registered Canadian Sainfoin cultivar. And then after 9 years, in 1980, the second cultivar, Nova, was registered in Canada. Since 1980 to 2015, there was a gap in which there was no any breeding activities related to Sainfoin. So that could be because of the lower yield of alfalfa, lower yield of Sainfoin compared to alfalfa, or the research priorities on other crops. And the adaptability of Sainfoin, it has a narrow adaptability. But in 2020, there was an interest in Sainfoin, and then the Lethbridge Research and Development Center initiated Sainfoin breeding projects. And similarly, there was some Sainfoin activities with project called Healthy Hay and Legume Plus in Europe. And at present, Sainfoin is also studied as a perennial pulse crop. So Sainfoin is getting more interest in the present years. So the question is, why was there renewed interest in Sainfoin? And so I checked over the few characteristics over here. Persistency of Sainfoin, it's generally less than 5 years. Nutritive value of Sainfoin, it's less than that of alfalfa. And most of the Sainfoin cultivars were mostly single cut type. So, but still there was a renewed interest because of its early growth habit that exceeded the biomass yield of alfalfa in first cut. The other potential cause for the renewed interest could be because of Sainfoin is bloat free, and it has it's easy to grow as well. So if we look at over the nutritive value over here, Sainfoin has 36%, 32% of crude protein, whereas alfalfa has 36. That's less than compared to alfalfa. So yeah, the agronomic practices that I listed here is simply from the book that I cited over here, it's Sainfoin for Western Canada. And Sainfoin is very well adapted to Western Canada's growing conditions, which has the precipitation of 300 to 500 mm of annual rainfall, and with pH more than 6. Spring seeding is preferred, and the fall seeding of Sainfoin, it's not studied well. So seeding rate for Sainfoin is slightly higher in terms of pounds per acre. That's 30 pounds per acre. And Sainfoin is usually seeded not more than 3/4 of the inch. And then for Sainfoin, there's no specific inoculant developed so far. So we use either alfalfa or clover inoculant. And Sainfoin is 10 times more resistant to Roundup. And for post-emergence weed control, we usually use post and pursuit. we can get up to 2 to 3 cuts in irrigated and 1 to 2 cuts per year in dryland areas, totaling the biomass yield from 3.1 to 6.7 ton per hectare per acre. And then the seed yield is close to 1,000 pounds per acre. So yeah, before I talk about the breeding activities in Canada, I would like to talk about the breeding activities that's in across the world. And Sainfoin breeding activities have been done in North America, which are mainly focused on improving biomass yield, persistence, winter survival, compatibility with other species, and disease resistance. In the US, Ski and Remount, they are the older cultivars, and most recently, they have Sainfoin that was released in 2006. And the Land Institute at Kansas is studying the use of Sainfoin as a potential perennial pulse crop for human use. And they recently published a paper which says Sainfoin seeds contains 39% of the crude protein that's comparable to soybean and lupin, 7% of fat that's comparable to lupin, and then 7% of starch that's comparable to lupin. So nutrient-wise, Sainfoin has the potential. And they are also studying Sainfoin as a companion legume with intermediate wheatgrass. Just the picture over here, it's from their website, and they are looking at the compatibility of Sainfoin with intermediate wheatgrass. So the breeding efforts in Europe, there's mainly 2 projects, Legume Plus and Healthy Hay. Before that, there's a lot of cultivars developed, such as Ambra, Vala, and there were a lot, but they were all released prior to 1970s. And the recent projects, they look at genetic analysis, agronomic evaluations, chemical, biological, and environmental assessment, nutritional analysis, and they also developed methods for screening Sainfoin. But so far, there's no report of any improved Sainfoin cultivar from their program. And moving forward, there were a couple of works done in New Zealand in which they collected about 80 different Sainfoin accessions from 10 countries, and then selected for the traits they are looking for the climatic condition of New Zealand. And their first Sainfoin cultivar was developed in 2005, but that cultivar was only recommended for dry and cold regions where alfalfa cannot be grown. And since then, there's no any research or new cultivars in New Zealand. In Iran and Turkey, they are doing drought-tolerant studies for Sainfoin that contains high proline content kind of thing, but so far they are not looking, or they are not developing any cultivars so far. So yeah, now I would like to focus more on the breeding of Sainfoin in Canada, what motivates it, and where we are. So in 2001, Dr. Surya Acharya, he initiated the Sainfoin breeding project in Lethbridge. And the motivation for Sainfoin was basically because of the 2 characteristics. The first one is Sainfoin is well adapted to the semi-arid regions, that's the Canadian prairies. And Sainfoin Sainfoin is bloat-free, that can save around 300 to 500 million per year globally. So what makes Sainfoin bloat-free? The answer is because it has condensed tannin on its vegetative tissues. And when Sainfoin and alfalfa are mixed fed, with at least 10 or 20% of Sainfoin in the mixture, that can reduce up to 90% of the bloat. And when grazing fresh alfalfa and Sainfoin pasture, it might be one of the strategies to reduce the bloat while grazing. So that's the motivation behind to initiate the Sainfoin breeding program here in Lethbridge. So we know Sainfoin do not cause bloat, but there are several questions that were not answered while the Sainfoin breeding project was established. The 4 questions were whether Sainfoin cultivar can grow together with alfalfa and persist as a perennial crop. That's a question related to the compatibility of Sainfoin with alfalfa. The other one is whether Sainfoin produce this comparable biomass that has profitable return to the producers. And the third question was whether Sainfoin in alfalfa can make a pasture bloat safe. And the fourth question was whether livestock would grade Sainfoin to the same extent as alfalfa. This series of questions were addressed through a series of experiments conducted. And then, to initiate the breeding project, 10 founder cultivars, Splendid, Eski, Nova, and that's the list of more. And they were seeded in alternate rows with alfalfa. And the main goal is to exert the selection pressure by growing Sainfoin and alfalfa together. Another concern with Sainfoin was a single cut, and to select for the multiple cut, Sainfoin frequent harvest scheme was adopted. That means Sainfoin alfalfa plots were harvested 3 to 4 times a year, and then selected for the one that has the better regrowth. And with this, 3 improved populations were developed based on phenotypic recurrent selection, and they are named LRC 3900, LRC 3901, and LRC 3902. And the proportion or the number of the plants in each populations is listed here. What we can see here, it's Splendid has higher number of plants. That's why it got a higher number of plants in all these new populations as well. And another one is Raymond, that was the cultivar developed in the US, and it's second to the Splendid. LRC 3902, which mostly has Splendid as the major contributor, later becomes Mountainview. And then LRC 3519, which is the Splendid itself. Selection on the Splendid for multiple times leads to the Glenview. So yeah, this table is the meta-analysis from the results from the paper by Acharya et al. That's published in Agronomy Journal in 2013. And in this table, I'm showing you the performance of Sainfoin populations for Sainfoin composition and total biomass yield. So the response variable is over here is the Sainfoin composition. And what we can see here is Nova, that's the older cultivar of Sainfoin that has only 17% in the mixture, compared to LRC 3519, which is 34%, and LRC 3902, which is close to 32%. And the Sukla variance, that's just the stability of the cultivar across different locations and environment. So the lower this variance, it's more adapted to more locations. And this is the ranking of the cultivars based on the mean, and this is the ranking of the populations and cultivar based on the stability. And this is the combined ranking based on the Sainfoin composition and dry matter yield. So what we are seeing here is the combined ranking would be the lower, it's the better. That's why LRC 3902 is the best cultivar for selection over here. And then if we just look at the concern of compatibility, newer population of Sainfoin has higher compatibility with alfalfa compared to the Nova. So the first question was addressed. And then this is what we saw with LRC 3902 and AC Blue Jay. It's the picture taken in 2010, and both alfalfa and Sainfoin, they are growing together and they looks good. So another question was, is alfalfa as productive as alfalfa? And then it's also the meta-analysis from the same paper. And if we look at the alfalfa, that's long view, it has a lower yield than our good populations, LRC 3915 with more than 10 ton per hectare, and the LRC 3902 with more than 10 ton per hectare. And then if you look at these beddings over here, they all received 5. That means Sainfoin is as productive as alfalfa. So some population of Sainfoin can be as productive as alfalfa. So the third question is about the bloat control in the mixture, and this is the figure from Soti et al. And if you look at the figure to the right, we can see the number of bloat incidents in new Sainfoin cultivar 3519. This is this one over here and this one over here. The number of bloat incidents is reduced by 98% in LRC 3915 mixed stand compared to the Nova. So once the third concern is solved, the fourth concern is about preference by cattle. And on this one, we see Sainfoin has slightly lower preference. That's 0.8 compared to 1 with alfalfa. And in the 2012, it has 0.6 compared to 1 for alfalfa. However, as they are grazed for multiple days, they tend to have the similar preference. So the preference wouldn't be a big issue if we are to graze the cattle. So once all the 4 issues are solved, then we are open to develop or release the new cultivar. And then it's a flowchart for the development of the Mountainview. It was initiated in 2001 with 10 Sainfoin cultivars, and they were seeded in alternate rows with AC Blue Jay alfalfa. They were evaluated for their compatibility for biomass yield and proportion Sainfoin in the alfalfa. This is the evaluation phase. And then in 2005, 200 individuals were selected, and that leads to the selection cycle. In 2006, seeds were harvested and bulked to generate the synthetic population, and then went for multi-locational trial, including grazing for test for the bloating with the animal, and then it was finally released in 2015. So Mountainview is a single selection cycle cultivar, and that's after the release of Mountainview, it's the paradigm shift in the forage industry, and there were local journals highlighting the work. And this is one that I like the most, which says the superhero that can fight cattle bloat is dressed in pink. And with that, Mountainview, the another cultivar, Glenview, was developed, and it's the workflow for this cultivar. It started similar like that with Mountainview, 10 founder Sainfoin cultivars, and then evaluated for biomass yield and compatibility. And then 300 individuals were selected out of cultivar Splendid. At this time, Glenview was selected totally from Splendid, and Mountainview was selected from multiple Sainfoin cultivars. They were then cross-pollinated to generate LRC 3519. I have talked about that previously a lot. And then there was a selection cycle 2 in Glenview. That's totally, the grazing pressure was applied in the population 3519. And then that was evaluated for multi-locational trial and then released in 2018. So it's just a very brief summary of the genetic gain from a monoculture test. And compared to Nova, Mountainview has 17% genetic gain, and Glenview has 12% genetic gain, and LRC 3519 has 23% genetic gain. So one major concern about the Sainfoin cultivars is their persistency. So as the Sainfoin stand get to the ages after like 4 years of establishment, we are seeing lower proportion of Sainfoin in the mixture. Just over here, we are seeing a decline from 49% to 31%. And the same in other locations as well. So there was a independent validation test kind of studies that was done by Bill Billigatu from University of Saskatchewan. And then, so on this one, the new cultivars, they did not seem to have a very good proportion when planted with alfalfa. But one of the reasons could be the high proportion of the weeds. But there's more works needed to do the validations. So yeah, there is studies such as new Sainfoin cultivar were not equally competitive. And this is a study that we published last year in Canadian Journal of Plant Science. And in this study, we are looking at the compatibility of Sainfoin with alfalfa and orchard grass in 2 different environments. And this work was done in Lethbridge. And we have the irrigated plot over here and dry land. This is the contribution, that's proportion of Sainfoin in the irrigated, and this is the proportion of Sainfoin in the dryland areas. The x-axis, we have harvest. The harvest 1 to 9 indicate the 9 harvest from the second production year, and it would be 3 harvests per year. In dryland, we have 2 harvests per year, so there's only 6 harvests. So what we are seeing here is this one is the mixture of Sainfoin with orchard grass, and with orchard grass, the proportion of Sainfoin increases over different harvest period, except for the Nova. Nova with dotted line is over here. And then with alfalfa, and all the Sainfoin cultivar, whether new or old, we see the declining trend, and Nova on the bottom over here. We have the similar trend in dryland too. instead in dryland, we don't see increase in Sainfoin proportion when seeded with orchard grass. It's kind of the same. But with alfalfa, and the proportion has a sharp decline. And this is the same study in which I'm showing the dry matter yield. And this study was on this study. There's not much to take on this study, but we can see these three new Sainfoin cultivars: LRC 3432, LRC 3519, and 3900. They have slightly higher biomass yield compared to the Nova. And when orchard grass is planted or seeded in monoculture, which is the first bar over here, and over here, and over here, orchard grass has the least performance. And the new Sainfoin has comparable performance to Longview, which is the alfalfa cultivars. So it's in another study, we have 5 different alfalfa cultivars and 7 different Sainfoin population. And these 4, Nova 161, Remont, and Melrose, they are the older Sainfoin cultivars, and the last 3 are the newer Sainfoin cultivars. And we are seeing up to 700% increase in the Sainfoin proportion when seeded with Arrowhead for LRC 3519. With beaver, we increased from 13% in Nova to 50% with LRC 3519. So with Longview and Nova, the proportion changes from 6.2 to Longview and LRC 3519 up to 40%. So in all of these 3 LRC designated population, we are seeing higher than 25% of the Sainfoin in the mixture. That means that's capable to prevent bloat. This one has the dry matter yield of the same study, and obviously Sainfoin in monoculture can produce up to 13 tons per hectare, but with alfalfa, the production can be increased. And again, this study also suggests Sainfoin is more or less as competitive to alfalfa, and the selection of the good cultivar can yield as much as alfalfa. So this is another study in which we studied the fitness of Sainfoin with 3 different grass species, and there were 5 environments. Lethbridge seeded in 18 and 19, Saskatoon we have in 18 and 20, and Carmon it's in Manitoba in 2018. We seeded 5 different Sainfoin populations with 3 different grass species: hybrid broom, meadow broom, and orchard grass. And there were same row and alternate row planting. And this is just the picture of the plot that I took yesterday, and it's the plot seeded in 2018. And it's the grass and Sainfoin equally, and it looks more compatible. And what we are looking here is the seeding method. When we were doing seeding, we did the same row seeding and alternate row seeding. And except in Lethbridge 2018 and Lethbridge 2018, the same row planting doesn't do any good in other locations or other environments. It's for the biomass yield and proportion of Sainfoin. It has it's the same. So with grass species, for Sainfoin proportion or Sainfoin contribution, orchard grass has relatively more Sainfoin proportion when we seed it with orchard grass. But for biomass yield, hybrid broom or meadow broom, they comes to be higher in Lethbridge when seeded in 2018 and Saskatoon 2020. So for biomass yield, there was not much difference between hybrid broom and meadow broom. And for Sainfoin contribution, orchard grass has a relatively higher proportion of Sainfoin. And if you look at the different Sainfoin populations, there was not much difference in overall biomass yield, whether that's the new Sainfoin cultivar or the old Sainfoin cultivar, that's Melrose over here. And similar to that in proportion Sainfoin contributions. There were some population that were slightly better, but overall, that's not much effects. So yeah, on this one, I'm showing you which one where or which combination it's best for which environment. And to simplify, I would like you to look at this sector and where you can see Carman 18, Saskatoon 18, and Saskatoon 20. On these three environment, the Vortex, which has a Melrose with orchard grass, that's the better combination to grow on those locations if you are looking for higher Sainfoin contributions. But Mountainview with orchard grass is a better choice at two environments in Lethbridge. For dry matter yield, that's a different story. And Carman 18, Saskatoon 20, and Lethbridge 19, those three environment has LRC 4498 with meadow broom as a winner. And Melrose with hybrid broom is the winner in Lethbridge and Saskatoon, and that were planted in 2018. So this is kind of confusing, like where or which is the clear winner, and therefore I did a multi-trait stability index in which I used different weight for the biomass yield and Sainfoin proportion. And this one, the first one is a 50-50, 50 for the Sainfoin dry matter yield and 50% for proportion Sainfoin based on dry matter. And if we average across all the locations and all the environments and multiple years, Mountainview with orchard grass is the winner for both traits, for biomass yield and proportion Sainfoin composition. But when I gave the weight 25% for the proportion Sainfoin and 75% for the dry matter yield, we have LRC 4498 meadow broom the winner. And the same when I gave 10% weight to Sainfoin dry matter proportion. So overall, what we are seeing here is the orchard grass, when it has the lowest weight for the proportion of Sainfoin, all the orchard grass combination, they comes to the bottom. And then LRC 4498 with meadow broom or hybrid broom, that's the best combination to cultivate if we are looking for the broad spectrum in the all three provinces. And then we also did the quality assessment of the forages, and Sainfoin obviously has higher nitrogen, lower ADF and lower NDF. And this one, we did the in vitro digestibility assessment after 48 hours of incubation, and Here it's the proportion of the grass and Sainfoin. It's 100% Sainfoin. It's 25% grass and 75% Sainfoin, and likewise 100% grass. And meadow means meadow broom grass, and orchard means orchard grass. So the traits we measure are dry matter and digestibility, neutral detergent, fiber digestibility, total gas production, and methane production. We want these two traits to have a higher, to have better quality, and then these two traits, the gas production, to be lower. And interestingly, orchard grass has a higher dry matter digestibility when the Sainfoin or the proportion of Sainfoin is higher. And we have two different results for meadow and orchard grass for the methane gas production. So with meadow broom, the proportion of methane gas production is lower with the higher proportion of Sainfoin, and then it's higher with a higher proportion of Sainfoin. So yeah, the take-home messages of this is for mixture with alfalfa, Sainfoin alfalfa mixture has higher biomass yield than alfalfa or Sainfoin monoculture. And newer cultivar of Sainfoin has better compatibility with alfalfa. Alternate row seeding was helpful when we seed alfalfa and Sainfoin. And the last one, the proportion of Sainfoin, either new or old, decreases with stand age in both irrigated and non-irrigated condition when cultivated when seeded with alfalfa. For the grass mixture, Sainfoin does not have a noticeable compatibility issue with any of the grass species. So in all the grass species, it has more than 25% of Sainfoin proportion in the mixture. Newer cultivars of Sainfoin, which is Mountainview and Glenview, that do not have any additional advantage compared to the old cultivars. Unlike alfalfa, alternate row seeding may not be economically beneficial for Sainfoin grass mixtures. And the incorporation of Sainfoin with perennial meadow broom gas can help reduce methane emission, and not with orchard grass. And the last one, LRC 4498 with meadow broom grass could serve as an excellent forage management combo for the broader Canadian prairies areas. So with this, I would like to acknowledge Dr. Surya Acharya, who has done significant amount of work on this significant amount of work that I'm presenting today. And I'd also like to acknowledge Bill Bilugetu from University of Saskatchewan, Doug Katani from University of Manitoba, Yuxi Wang, who has done the in vitro studies, Stacy Singer, Doug Messenger, Brandon, Mike, and several graduates and undergraduate students that work on this long-term projects. And I would like to thank you all for listening. And with that, I'll be open for questions.
All right. Thanks very much, Harry. That was excellent. How do you want to handle the questions? There's some posted in the chat. Would you like me to read them out to you, or can you see them there?
Yeah, I will also see them, and let's see. Okay.
If that's okay, if not, I can read them out as well.
Yeah.
And if there's any follow-up questions and anyone online today, you can certainly turn your mics on and ask those questions as well.
So this is a question from Lynn Powell.
Yeah.
Powell, and was the Sainfoin allowed to go to seed at all and reseed itself? So if this is the question for For the hay or for the studies that I'm presenting here, Sainfoin is not allowed to go all the way to the seeding. So we normally do the haying at 10 to 20% of 10 to 20% of the flowering time. So the answer is we don't let it go to the seeding stage, and there is no chance of reseeding. So another was as a potential way to address lack of persistence. Okay, so it would be great if Lynn can explain a little bit on that question.
Lynn, are you on still? Just want a bit of clarification on your second part of your question. As a potential way to address lack of persistence.
Would be to allow it to reseed itself. That could be the explanation, right?
So Lynn, you want to go ahead? I was just wondering, I just meant if you let it go to seed in a way to address the lack of persistence. That's all I meant. So, but if it never was let to go to seed, then that kind of answers my question.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So, yeah, when you allow to get to the seeding stage itself, I think that would be you are compromising on the quality when you harvest them for forages, but and for if you are looking for the seed production and looking for the persistence on that one, I think that would also not be more profitable because yeah, the reseeding may not be as so yeah, I think that's the way I look on that one. And yeah, reseeding may not help in seed production as well. So did I answer that question?
Can I say something, Harry?
Yes, please.
I think this is Surya. I think I did a lot of work with Sainfoin.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
The key thing is when we are doing these tests, the plots are side by side. So if by any chance they go into seed, where they drop the seed, you don't know when it is blowing 100 clicks sometimes in Lethbridge area. So I think we'd never allow that to happen. I think our aim is to look at their yield at the optimum quality stage. That means 10% bloom. So we never allow that to happen. And the other interesting thing is if you are growing it with another crop and let it go to seed, they probably both the crops would produce seed. And sometimes if you are growing it with grass, it would be overwhelmed with grass seeds all over the place. That's why for experiment purposes, we never allow it to go to seed.
Yeah, thanks, Surya. So that helped a lot, I think. And there's another question about persistence under drought by Doug Ray, and it's an excellent question. So it's it's difficult to say how Sainfoin will persist under drought condition, but so our research shows Sainfoin is not as drought tolerant to that of alfalfa, and we are working on selecting for the drought tolerant Sainfoin. What we are doing for that purpose is we are having a plot at swift current that has very drought conditions in last multiple of years, and those populations when we selected they are doing better in the drought areas than our Mountainview and Glenview. We have a picture of that. We have done the evaluations, and it seems the selections were performing better at swift current locations, but not at the Lethbridge. So does that answer your question, Doug? Are you there?
I'm going to unmute here, Harry. Yeah, thanks for your presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're going to find out, you know, if it's hanging around after this year. We've had 3 or 4 drier years, and now this one's extremely dry at this point. If the Sainfoin makes it through, I think we'll know that it has some drought tolerance. Certainly, no species is really thriving under our current conditions, but we've got it in a mixed grass stand with other legumes, so it's in an environment that you never put it, and then it does get to flower or to seed from time to time. So all those variables are somewhat different under our management currently. So I think we're going to find out. We'll have an idea coming out of when the rain comes back, if it ever does. Then we'll find out.
Yeah. Thanks, Doug. Yeah. Then another question is from Grant, and it's LRC 4498 appeared to do well. What is happening to it in the future? So yeah, it's an excellent question, and so we are moving forward with LRC 4498. We need a little bit of more evaluations done to that before we can think about releasing as a cultivar. But yeah, we will definitely work on LRC 4498 and the good thing about LRC 4498 is it has, I believe it has drought tolerance potential as well, because this one has better performance at Saskatoon and in the Carman during the last drought years as well. So yeah, really, yeah. Go ahead, Grant.
We had a population that was selected in Swift Current after 4 or 5 years of growth there. We had picked up some plants. Did you make a different population from those selections?
So you made the one we dug from?
Yeah, Swift Current.
Yeah, we took it. Yeah. So it's we got the first harvest last year from the greenhouse.
So that may have some potential for extreme dry conditions.
Yeah. For some reason, this 4498, there appears to be more on that one. Yeah. So is Grant there? You wanna have any additional question on that one? If not, I will move to the next one. How does Sainfoin do compare to alfalfa under drought condition? Hello, as it has the ability to produce. Yeah, I can.
Oh, sorry. No, I just was really curious because I knew you had an acid tolerant one coming out. And so I was trying to understand where 4498 fell into the future of the breeding program, because I saw that Mountainview did reasonably well in the work that the Peace Country Beef and Forage Association had done at Fairview with a 5.4 pH soil after 3 years. It had dropped down with no reseeding or anything, and then at Entwistle, it was worked down after 3 years again at 21%, I think, from 50. So again, no reseeding, but it's just trying to understand the potential of these new varieties you're bringing forward, and understanding, quite surprising how Sainfoin did quite well with lower pH.
Yeah, unfortunately, our acid tolerant was not taken by anyone. So I think for now, I don't have any plans of releasing that as a cultivar. And if we'll do more testing as needed, but yeah, it also depends upon the interest of the producers. And so yeah, so everything we want to breed, we want it to be utilized by the producers. And for your part with Mountainview, and that you said really doing great at Peace View or Peace River region, right? That's what I understood.
Yes, at Fairview College, the Peace Country Beef and Forage Association, Dr. Kimo Mancanye had planted it and reported the soil pH was 5.4 in
Wow, yeah.
his published work.
Okay, I didn't get a chance to look at that paper yet. But yeah, it's the one that we have here. It's better than Mountainview for sure. And yeah, I think there are opportunities for us to look on those sites as well, and then see like if our acid tolerant is still or that will do better than Mountainview on those areas, including the northern Alberta. Those are the plans to move forward, just testing with these cultivars at more locations and see how they performs. That answers your question, Grant?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah, you are welcome.
I put another question in, but I think Harry Brook had one or somebody others. So please take them in order. I don't want to take other people's spots.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll go with the another question. But yeah. So this is also about drought condition, and then yeah, from our experience, Sainfoin alfalfa has better drought. Not all alfalfa, it depends upon cultivar you choose, but overall, I can say alfalfa is more drought tolerant than Sainfoin. And then the question that is have the ability to produce than alfalfa when rain finally arrives. So this question is still not totally understood, and it's not. We don't have a lot of research on these areas. What we are seeing is if we are comparing to alfalfa, I don't think Sainfoin is doing better on those drought conditions compared to alfalfa. So I think that's my answer. But if anyone has any real-time experience, they can share here. So yeah, if you want to add anything, Harry, please add something, and then we can discuss about this question more.
I think you can move on, Harry.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So if not, yeah, I'm moving into the next question.
Yeah, for sure.
So how does post-frost lift drop and Sainfoin compare for stockpiling grazing? CNV has much better lift retention than alfalfa. So on this one too, CMB has much better lift retention than alfalfa, and that's true. I think Sainfoin has less lift retention than alfalfa. That's how I rank CMB, alfalfa, and Sainfoin. Is that correct, Surya?
No, I don't think so. I think Sainfoin has better retention capability compared to alfalfa. It depends on the conditions.
Yeah.
But in general, probably Sainfoin would hold on to the leaves a little bit longer compared to alfalfa. And Sicer milk patch, of course, would have the best.
Yeah. So these areas need to be researched well. Yeah. Then that's we are just telling the answer based on our experience, and then so it depends upon the year to year, and then it depends upon the cultivars. So yeah, more research has to be done in these areas as well, and that's no forage agronomist, I think, for our province.
Yeah, I think Harry,
yeah,
my observation in that we've had 3 or 4 fairly dry late summer and fall over the last 5 years here, and it looks to me like, you know, those when they get stressed late in the season by drought, you know, the tonnage that we're actually getting out of them for grazing starts to drop pretty dramatically, and you know, they might end up eating that dry grass, but I don't think they're getting as much relative tonnage out of the Sainfoin. Seems like those plants can dry up a little bit and lose some leaves to the point where they're not a major yield factor under those conditions. In the early in the season when the moisture is good, then I think, you know, they do pretty well. But it looks to me like the drought, as the plant matures and the dry season comes along, we lose some of that tonnage that the cattle might harvest. That'd be my observation.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. So I'll move to the next question by down. Any suggestion on making Sainfoin maintain us stand longer than 4 years? We do not have only grades. Yeah. So with management practices, it's we are saying for the regrowth and for maintaining the stand longer, the only way would be to identify the appropriate stage for grazing, which would be just close to the flowering stage, and then not to overgraze. Those are the basic management strategies in all the forage crops, and definitely for Sainfoin. Yes, and the other thing is for grazing, we don't have a lot of data on grazing studies here. We are doing mostly haying, and that's definitely some other thing that we can do is to breed for the persistence of Sainfoin alone by grazing animals and then selecting out from there. I believe Glenview should be more persistent under grazing than Mountainview, but still, yeah, this is the continuous work, and we'll keep on working on those things as we move along. Do you want to add anything, Dan, on my answer? Do you have any additional questions? If not, I would like to move to the next question, and it's basically the same question: grazing management strategies to increase stand longevity. Yeah, I just answered to this question. So yeah, I'll move with the next question over here from Mike. I'm in normally higher rainfall areas. How does handle lots of rain lower land, or is it just about the same as alfalfa? So, Mike, I don't know where you are from, but for your question, if you are in the prairies, then I would say the rainfall will not affect. The higher the rainfall, it's better within these areas. But if you have extremely higher rainfall, just like in the East Coast, where the drainage is low, then Sainfoin doesn't do as well as alfalfa.
Okay, I am actually in Grazing County, and we can get a lot of rain at once. And we have a lot of lower land peaty type soils.
Okay.
Which,
okay.
And of course, with alfalfa, I've stayed away from the peaty soils. And so far, I've had good luck with it. But yeah. I also noticed that a lot of the low spots, it will die out eventually. Alfalfa will, and you have good stems on the higher ground. The last few years, we've been outside of last June, we've been as dry as everybody else. We are getting rain right now, so that's a good thing. So I understand, from what I understand, you're saying it's treated about the same as alfalfa.
So can you repeat that one?
Sainfoin would not stand wet feet. Would not like wet feet.
Okay, so yeah, basically treat it just like I would alfalfa.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So moving next, Doug Ray's question, measure persistent, how many cuts per year you are taking? So we are taking 3 cuts for irrigated areas and 2 cuts for non-irrigated areas, and the measure of persistence is basically the proportion of Sainfoin as we harvest. So if we see a decline in the proportion of Sainfoin over years, then we call it's not as persistent as its companion crop. Is there anything you want to add, Doug?
No, that answers my question. If you're taking 2 cuts a year on dry land, then you know, we're probably mimicking to a large extent what you're doing. It's under these drought conditions, we've kind of changed to a once over, so a 1 cut a year, but then it gets more and more mature over time. So as long as you have enough moisture to make it grow, and right now nothing's growing, so that's kind of changing our dynamic. But at 2 cuts a year, yeah, that would be. I think we're going to see a lot more than 4 years persistence, though. I think looks to me like it's going to hang on in our pastures a lot more than 4 years.
Yeah, I think you are right. That's a lot of factors playing the role over there, but so by persistence on Sainfoin, I'm just measuring it's compared to alfalfa, and we are getting like that's how I presented making over some kind of feeling like Sainfoin is or the stand is getting lower over the years. Yeah, thanks, Doug. And that's another question from Houston, where I have been seeing any long-term persistence of Sainfoin. It was due to grazing management that allowed reseeding after a few years. Yeah, I have heard a lot of producers or several producers that says they have Sainfoin for more than 10 years. Yeah, it all depends upon the grazing management and whether you allowed that for reseeding or not. And what I was talking about was the comparison when we do the multiple cuttings in the small plots. So yeah, that totally can make a difference, and especially most of the work that we are doing is under competition with alfalfa or with grasses. And as I mentioned today, with the grass, there's probably not a lot of problem with the proportion of Sainfoin or composition of Sainfoin in the mixture, but with alfalfa, we are seeing a reduced proportion as the age is or as the stand age.
All right, thank Harry.
And
I'm
yeah.
just gonna, I
Yeah.
think I'm gonna cut you off here. Not that, I mean, there's some really great questions.
Yeah.
But what we're thinking is that we only booked everybody in here today until 8:30.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
what we'll do is we'll send you some of the questions that weren't addressed. Hopefully you can address them personally through an email. And unless anyone has one last quick question, I'd like to again thank Ari for presenting today. I know we learned a lot and there's lots of great information, and I think Sainfoin is that crop to grow, right?
So that's one question from Doug Ray here. Like, can you track how much seed from a variety is planted each year? And so I'm also wondering, like, if there is any information or any resources to find those things, that would be great. I'm looking at. So anybody has any idea where can we track how many or how much of the forage cultivar is planted each year?
I think that's a very good question.
Variety wise, you won't find the information anywhere.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So then there was someone who was saying the insurance guys, they might have information,
Right.
but they are, yeah.
Many people are seeding them common seed, so they don't have varieties.
Right. There's that too, right? For sure. All right. Well, I'd like to thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.
Well, go ahead. Sorry, Ari.
That's okay. Yeah. So just like you said, thanks everyone. And then, I'll try to, or I will try to answer your questions and then send it. So how would I send the answer to the questions? Maybe
you can, yeah, I can
right?
send you a document with the questions, and then you can send it back to me and we can post it with the video recording on the website.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good, Amanda. Yep.
Great. Thanks so much.
And thanks everyone.
Everybody. And watch for the next session. You can watch your email for the next session. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.